Welcome to another episode of Omni Athlete. You believe that you can be more, and so do we. We created this show and company to do it with you by empowering your performance with the wisdom and techniques of the world's highest achieving mind, body, and spirit competitors. Okay, so today's guest is a former actor, director, and internationally competitive athlete turned peak performance coach, healer, and catalyst for seekers on the path of reconnecting to unconditional love. Blending a unique healing modality called Theta Healing with a focus on uncovering the emotional through lines of our life and limiting beliefs that subtly guide our ups and downs. He empowers his community, clients, and ecosystem to surface the stories they carry and step into an authentic version of themselves ready to perform at their optimal level. It's my pleasure to introduce to Omni Athlete, Sasha Vishdehi. Welcome to the show, Sasha.
Thank you very much, Josh.
So typically what happens in these interviews is I do a lot of work to make sure I can share the story of our guest prior to the interview itself so that we can just kind of dive right in. And as I was doing the research on you, what struck me is that your story feels absolutely incredibly diverse. So I'd actually like to break from form a little bit and ask you to share a little bit about what's brought you to this moment, and maybe the backdrop being specifically what brought you to the need to uncover some of these stories and share them in a much deeper way.
Yeah, so again, I come from a diverse background. I was born in England. My parents were in school in England, Persian father, Finnish mother. And we moved to Iran from there. And from Iran, there was a revolution and all that happened. So my mom was unwilling to stay there to deal with the political, kind of the rules of the hijab and whatever was imposed by the Islamic Republic. So we left. She had a Canadian passport. So we left. We went to Canada. And at about, and then my sports story came in because my parents are athletic, but they were not athletes. Okay. And my love of sport pretty much hit immediately. And I got my hands on baseball, hockey, anything I could. And I landed on tennis. And what I found was so when you come from a diverse background, you're already an immigrant, you're coming back. I may not sound like one because I spoke English fluently, but culturally I was definitely an immigrant. And you're struggling to find your place. And then you take up sport, and that kind of adds to your interior struggles. So I think my life has been about finding out what's really running the show, the causes of pain, and how to find real lasting solutions to emotional pain and to our struggles, our general struggles. I think that's really my life goal.
So where did that show up for you, whether it be in tennis or just sport specifically, right? As young people, when we jump into sport, a lot of times these unconscious, these subtle stories and drivers that we're not really aware of, we don't necessarily have that awareness around. So can you reflect on where that showed up as you went through that journey as an athlete?
Yeah, for sure. So it's interesting that, this idea that everything happens for a reason. I found tennis, and it was the sport. See, tennis is unique. I find tennis is unique is that it's an individual sport and you can't run away from yourself. I played baseball. I played soccer. You can kind of hide in these sports, although in baseball I was a pitcher, so there's not much hiding as a pitcher. But the sport I really took to was tennis. Little did I know, and I've always been a natural athlete. So at the beginning, it was easy. I was going deep into tournaments. Yeah. And I was like, wow, this is great. Until I started to play players that challenged me and were at a different level and had started younger than me. And that's really where I came up against myself and my belief system and the voices within. And I noticed that the game of tennis was an absolute mental and emotional roller coaster. It's really a proving ground for the mind. And I just finished Nadal's book, Rafael Nadal, if you may know. He's one of the greatest players in the history of the game, one of the world's great athletes. And he said, if anything, tennis is a game of the mind. And so that was really my introduction to banging up against the mind, the ego, the stories we tell ourselves, and has a real impact on the court, and the results show of what's going on in your mind. You have a result that tells you in a real way what's happened.
Did you feel that in real time as you started to see, wow, okay, I'm getting, this match is tighter than I expected, or I'm getting pushed more than I expected, and I'm feeling tighter, I'm feeling angrier, more frustrated, more embarrassed? I mean, did you have that kind of awareness in real time as you first started to butt up against that edge?
Oh my God. In real time. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It was an absolute struggle. I have to tell you, it was an absolute struggle. You don't struggle in the matches that there's flow, and you hit your stride and it's over before you even know what happened, because you did so well in a way. The real time happens when there's real struggles. You're not performing at your best. You're being challenged. And those were the teenage years on the court and playing at the highest provincial level and the national level. Yeah. It was brutal. And I wondered at the time, I felt like a failure. And I was always reticent to share how I felt. I didn't really have a guide emotionally. And I was reticent to share. And that's so important for young athletes, is to have just someone to talk to. I didn't. Or I felt that I had to stifle what was happening. And what that caused was a deep sense of isolation, because I thought, I'm the only one that's feeling this. Yeah. I am a failure. I was up, I'm just going to give you an example. I was up 6-4, 5-2, and I lost. I'm a total failure. And then the next match, same thing. I go up, and then I go down. I go, here we go again. Yeah. And I thought I was the only one. I thought there was something intrinsically wrong with me.
Do you feel like that was exacerbated because tennis is an individual sport? I mean, did you have those same feelings maybe at a different level? If you were playing at a higher level in tennis than, say, soccer, it's maybe a different level of competition. But did you feel like because you could hide a little bit more in a team sport per se, or baseball, were those feelings of isolation heightened?
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I didn't feel them in other sports. I didn't feel them. Mind you, I didn't play at the higher level in the other sports. Sure. So maybe they would have shown up, but it's different. As I said, after in my early 30s, I played on a semi-professional soccer team. Yeah. It's just not the same as tennis. You can't hide on the field. If you're not feeling good, you can kind of stand in a corner almost. So tennis is different in that there is no hiding. You have to perform. Otherwise, nothing happens. You're the generator. When it's your turn to serve, you generate. So when you're the generator, it's there and you're naked in a way. It's a very naked feeling.
Did that energy carry with you into acting, or what was the crossover there from that experience of really having to stare yourself in the face on that emotional and mental level? Where did that cross over into acting? The
acting, I have to tell you, in the acting field, I feel I didn't really, I was somewhat emotionally immature because I went into it from, I had put so much into tennis and I needed a break. Yeah. I just put down my racket and said, I'm going to go study acting. And I did. And I, did some shows and commercials and all that. But I didn't feel I was coming up to my emotional edge at all. And I think in a way I was young and I failed myself in the sense that I wasn't, the great actors are willing to go, here's my heart. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, there it is, all my faults. And in a way I went into acting to hide the faults. I reversed it, So I didn't really push the edge. Tennis is the place, apart from my family life and my marriage, where that really gets challenged, or where that got challenged.
So as you evolved as an athlete and now as a coach and somebody who's leading and helping shape that relationship and that dynamic for athletes, how did love evolve for you in that process, right? One of the through lines for our entire story, right, is that as athletes, we can learn to love ourselves as much as we love our sport. And so many of us are never taught that. We're not given a framework for it. And I wonder what helped you get through some of that isolation, and how did, whether we call it self-love or just love in a very general and open sense, how did that evolve over time to the point now where you're, as a coach, helping to shape that relationship too?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I've always known about myself that I've had a big heart. Yeah. I've just known that about myself, and I've always known how I feel about people. That was never in question for me. Yeah. No matter what anyone did, I always forgave them. I just noticed that about myself intrinsically. So I think that really wanting the best for people truly was that has guided me. But then the tough part is understanding my own emotional self as I relate to myself, as opposed to, okay, if I know I love that person, but how am I dealing with myself? So, and my life came to a kind of a head when I was about 30. So I'm 43 now. So it was about 12, 13 years ago, where the solutions I was looking for in my life, they weren't working out, and I was looking for a deeper purpose and also some tools. Yeah. And that's where I learned about, I got into Tibetan Buddhism and meditation and that. So I think I found something that allowed me, with the meditation and the Buddhist teachings and through the Tibetan community, to connect with myself in that way that I felt about others.
Did that make
question?
It did, and it brings up another one, which is, did that make its way into your coaching too, in how you work with athletes, especially in tennis, knowing the experience you had?
For sure. Well, first of all, it's a part of me, so I can't shelve it. Yeah. I can't shelve it. It's a matter of, I started this at the Rocky Mountain Tennis Center. Even with the younger kids, I started daily meditation. Even if it was, I said, guys, we're going to meditate for 3 minutes. And of course, there's giggles and there's this and that, no matter at what age. So you sprinkle it with where you see that there is some receptivity to let's just say, having a practice where you're just silent for a while. And I didn't make it a big thing. I don't want to make it this, all right, guys, now we're going to meditate. It's this big thing. No, we're just going to be silent, and it's a beautiful thing. We're in a group and we're silent. So I think if I had this from 5, 6, 7 years old, I think I would have accelerated athletically much faster, and I would have been able to deal with the challenges much better. And of course, as you get older, people are generally more receptive because they can sit still for longer and they can listen to, what you're saying. So it's depending on the person.
So there's a couple questions that just popped up for me. And one of them is so as a martial arts instructor, I've seen these moments where, you put kids, especially whether they're 4 years old, whether they're 8, 9, 10 years old, and you give them frameworks, right, for meditation, for just pausing, for really trying to find that stillness. And the energy of the room changes quite drastically. What have been some of the shifts that you've seen as a coach when you introduce practices like that to teams or just players on an energetic level?
That's interesting. The people that have reached, I'll just give you an anecdote.
Yeah.
I just had a very, very talented player named Casper Smith reach out to me. And I worked with him. I was his secondary coach. Kendall was his main coach, he grew up with Kendall. But I worked with him for probably about 1.5 years. Yeah. And he just sent me a note. He got a scholarship at the University of Washington. He's in a Pac-12 school. He's a great player, top 50 in the nation. And he just said, thank you. He sent me a note of thanks, but it was 6 months later. So I think these things that I've experienced, they take time for you to really ponder and go, wait a minute, that had a ripple effect in my life. I'm assuming that's why he sent me the note. Other than that, between points, tennis is a game between points. It's interesting. I work with runners now too, which is totally different because there's no stopping in running. Tennis is, the stress is between points. While you're playing, you're all good, usually. You know what I mean? Like, while you're in action, generally that's the space where you get to do your thing. And it's in between the points where the mind starts to work. So I think I've been able to help people in those between points where we can actually be intentional about what's going on, what we're doing, what our mind is up to, and how we can direct our mind. Because as all the great teachings of mindfulness teachings and Buddhist teachings have showed us, and yoga, is the mind without a guide is a monkey mind. It's on a rampage.
Where do you most consciously try to help guide an athlete between points? Is it on positive affirmations? Is it a phrase? Is it, that kind of literal tactical thought that they're trying to focus on? Is it just a feeling and connecting to a specific emotion as we're in between those points? Where do you typically start and focus when you're coaching someone?
So at a base level, it depends on the player, depends who they are, where they're coming from, because we come all from different emotional levels of experience and, all of that. We're complex beings. Yeah. But at a base level, it's about creating the groundwork to be present. Okay. So tennis, again, is a great terrain for this because we just had a point. The point is now over. We're in between the point, and you get to reset. You get to reset every point. You don't get to do that in running in that literal way, or in a soccer, 45 minutes, you play. So, so you have that period in between the point where you get to reset and get, totally reset your being to be present for the next moment. So I think that's the at the most basic level.
Yeah.
What I would tell a person their ultimate goal should be, because when we're talking about winning and losing, it's a big affair. Winning is a result of many micro moments that happen in the game, that happen within our consciousness. So if we can break it down moment by moment, and for tennis, it's great because it's point by point. I mean, it sounds so rudimentary and basic, but that's what it is.
So what does it feel like to be present between those points? Like what I think about right now is if I'm an athlete listening to this and I'm trying to apply, because presence is this word, right? We hear that, be present, be here, be now. And we hear these phrases, but a lot of times we're not given the feeling or the just kind of the sensation to anchor to or connect to, like, oh, that's it, which is a little bit of a catch-22. And I wonder, how would you describe that feeling of presence between points?
So one thing I will say about all this, and we talk about this in our, the Buddha talked about this all the way back 2,500 years ago. It's very different because what we're going for is a non-conceptual way of being, but we're using language to try and conceptualize the non-conceptual. So that's your catch-22.
Right.
Yeah. We're trying to put language to something that we experience.
Yeah.
So I was just going to jump in and say presence is not being there.
Yeah.
Presence is about you're not there anymore. At those moments, the ones I've experienced, because really I'm proposing something that I've experienced. Otherwise it wouldn't really jive. So in those moments, where I can tell you I wasn't there almost. That person that I've named, the concept that is this, was not there. And that's what presence is. And we want to, I think that's the place where we as physical beings are at our highest capability, where we're released of that. We're in a state of utter relaxation, yet utter focus. There's a duality there. So it's a fine line.
What opened the door for you when, and I know you mentioned you were at this point, right, when you first started down the road of really diving into Buddhist teachings and the spiritual side with much more depth. What opened the door internally to allow you to see, and I don't know if the word is process, but to grab onto these frameworks and connect them to something like sport, right? Because these are feelings that we have as athletes. A lot of times we experience from day one playing sport, but we sometimes close off our awareness and connection to them. So you've had this spiritual journey, you've had this process of saying, here is what I'm working through, here's my story. And somehow you were able to open up and allow that information in and allow those dots to connect. Where did that come from?
Well, it came from, I've always been an athlete, and I think as long as I'm able, I always will be an athlete. So whatever I experience as positive is going to go into sport.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I can help people in sport, so much the better. Because you accelerate your own learning when you teach things to people as well. They internalize. But for me, I came to a point where I was looking for happiness on the outside. And then I happened to pick up a book, and it's this Lama Yeshe's book, Ego, Attachment, and Liberation. And it was a free book. And I picked it up, and I opened it up, and I was like, one of the first things he says is that the normal mode in our world is to look for happiness on the outside, and that's why you're a mess. And I go, oh my God. And every sentence spoke to the pain I was in, and it had come to a head at that point because I was looking on the outside, basically grabbing spiritually and mentally for, okay, if this doesn't work, I'm going to try this. And he says, no, that's the fool's errand. So we have to sit with ourselves to understand, first of all, how you're creating these attachments, because they're all in the mind and the spirit. Attachments are within. They're not from the outside. If you become obsessed with a Ferrari, you're the one that's obsessed with it. Where did that come from? That's what seed did you plant that you feel you must have that in order to satisfy yourself? And so it exploded my inner world. It totally exploded my inner world. And I went deeply in, and I said, how do I study with this Lama Yeshe guy? Oh, he died 20 years ago, but he has a center in Northern California. So I went there, and I studied with the people that, he taught. So that was, I don't know if did that answer your question?
It did. And, Sasha, there's so many subtleties to your words and to the energy. And it's really not to use this pun, but it's energizing to me because there are these steps that you communicate with such simplicity. Yet for a lot of us, they're the challenge, right? So you read something like that and you had the courage to say, I need to go dive deeper. What was that experience like when you were able to take it from maybe the philosophy of a book to the tangibility of a practice that I'm going to now, whether it's literally eat, sleep, and breathe, or at least put hours and hours of dedicated time towards really embodying? What was that transition like?
To me, it was natural because I'm a person that seeks experience and not if I get frustrated when I get too intellectual. If it's all heady information and I forget things quickly, I was like, okay, so if I get all this information and I forget it in 2 days, what's the point? Really? So my thrust is, okay, let's go experience it. And I need to go experience what this is because it's coming from this place. He wrote this book. There's truth to it. I can feel that. What's he talking about? So let's go and practice. And I remember going there and I was like, this is me, right? 100%. I'm going all in. I was like, I'm going to be perfect. I'm going to do this perfectly. I'm going to do all my prostrations and I'm never going to err again in my life. Which again is an attachment, right? And I quickly fell from that ladder, that height. So yeah, it was, and I have to tell you, I come from a background where there's been a huge amount on both my parents' side of depression and a lot of self-destructive inner worlds that are self-destructive, anger, resentment, deep depression. I'm talking deep depression on both sides. And I was like, I'm at an age now, I don't want to, if I'm 70 years old, I don't want to end up 70 years old and in pain. Yeah. I need to find a real solution, not fake solutions, not short-term solutions. So that's why I went in, and it's been my life ever since. I went in and I haven't looked back because it offers, these are real tools for everyone. They're real tools.
What do you mean by real tools?
As an example, meditation and study of our minds. The Buddhists, in particular, the Tibetans I can say a blanket statement. They're masters of the mind. They have monasteries dedicated to studying the mind. They have a path to alleviate our suffering. So, what was the question?
In real tools. So give an example.
Real tools. Meditation. right now it's kind of a buzzword,
Right.
but meditation. And what that really means is, again, not making it a big deal. It's sitting in silence and watching what your mind is up to.
Hmm.
Okay. So that's a real tool, and you can use it. I use it every day. I do it sometimes twice a day, 3 times a day. You can do it anywhere. It doesn't cost anything. What a great thing. You don't need anyone else's help to do it. It's like the greatest thing in this world. And in those, as you practice more, you feel a real joy of just beingness. Wow. You don't need anything. So I would say that's one of the tools. And then the reading material is the other one. So in the Buddhist, in the Tibetan tradition, there's the experiential, and then there's the intellectual, is where we read about what we're going through. So both are needed. The wisdom mind, and they call it the analytic mind. Analytic, analysis and wisdom. Bring them together. So study and then experience, and then study and then experience. It's amazing when you dedicate yourself to this. You fundamentally change. You just fundamentally change. Things don't bother you as much. You're able to, it's not that you don't fall, but you're able to recover much quicker emotionally.
You had this really beautiful video and post about a year ago talking about coming out of hiding, right? And really sharing your story. Can you, one, share that story a little bit with our audience, and two, share a little bit about what allowed you to say, this is the right time for me to really step into the open?
Okay, that's a really interesting thing you bring up. I hired a coach. I believe in coaching. So if I propose coaching to someone, it's one thing. I'm not into my own hypocrisy. Okay, so sometimes we need help from the outside. So I hired a coach, and it led to me posting this video, and it was an insight I had about myself. And that insight was, wow. So in some ways, I've been in hiding, in some ways, and this social media, for everything that it is, it's so many things, but it allows one to go, hey guys, I've been in hiding. And I was like, I felt so ridiculous doing it. I have to tell you. I felt so ridiculous because my mom passed away a couple of years ago, and I know there were a lot of messages coming in, but I needed to process it myself. So I kind of detached from all the social media outlets, and then I came back on and said, guys, kind of been in hiding, I think, since I was a kid. And this is the impact it's had on me. And the thing went, in its own little way, it went viral. People were sharing it. And so it's just something I shared that I was feeling at the time, that there was a part of me in hiding.
What struck me, and the reason I ask, is because I think as athletes, a lot of times there's this maybe subtle perception that sport allows us not to hide. And I think, as you've already mentioned at times as we've been talking, right there, for a lot of us as athletes, we end up hiding in sport, very real, very literally. We hide pieces of ourselves. We hide thoughts that we don't want to acknowledge and really observe and experience. And so what I saw in watching the video, and what was just so energizing to me, is if we can create more space for ourselves to do that as athletes, one, to have a community around us that supports that kind of, whether it's big or small, that kind of expression, and two, the kind of liberation that occurs for us when we feel like we can just be ourselves and not have to hide, consciously or unconsciously, pieces. It just changes how we show up. Yes,
absolutely. What I'd like to add to that is, yes, there's this traditional, I don't know if tradition is the word about sport, about this part of our culture, I would say, that's all about being tough. And sports brings that up. You got to be tough. It's all about grit. It's this attitude that's, I'm going to break through everything, which in a way, it's like the Buddhist thing I talked about, which is analysis and wisdom. That's one side of it. That's not the whole side. Because then you're just like a brickhead trying to ram through a wall. You're not a bulldozer. You're a human being. So there's that element, which I think brings this, the question in mind of hiding, okay? Because we hide behind our perceived or our built shells of strength.
Right.
Okay. And, I'll go back to tennis is it more than anything. I've been acting, I've been on the stage, I've been on big TV shows where there's a lot of pressure. There's no other feeling of nakedness that I felt on a tennis court and being up and having it all fall apart. Nothing like it. It's like you have smashed into 10,000 pieces and you feel naked, and that's okay. I realize now, that's part of it, that's part of it, and that's okay. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
And when we have that feeling of isolation, it is challenging in an individual sport because there isn't the same cultural context, right? In a team sport, we are maybe not as willing to be as vulnerable naturally, but there's just this different dynamic, right? And I think this is what you were really pointing to earlier, right? We have teammates. So if they see that we're down, even if it doesn't really get to the soul level connection that we may need to unwind that story, there's still this kind of built-in relationship that's going to pull on something to help bring us up. When it's an individual sport, you really are just out there on your own unless somebody says, hey, that is okay. Have you mentioned before you didn't have any coaches or anybody who was really helping you do that when you were playing. Is that something you've tried to build into your work as a coach to help pull players out of that isolation?
Yeah, I mean, again, absolutely. The answer is yes, and depends how open they are to it. I've worked the gamut. I've had kids that are extremely emotionally troubled, all the way to very, emotionally healthy people. Yeah. So it depends where the person's coming from. But for sure, I think as a person, but I'll speak about myself. I yearn to help people if they're struggling, and you yearn for them to be open and coachable because it's going to help them. But it's being able to also, part of wisdom, I suppose, is being able to spot the people that they're not open to it at this time. So you can't push your way into imposing this onto anyone. If they're open to it, then so much the better, because you know how much you have struggled with this. So you want to help someone, really, so they don't have to go through the same struggles.
Well, this is a little bit of a left turn, but it feels really connected in the context. What has your creativity and sport, how do these two ideas overlap? Sometimes I think we look at them as different pieces of the world, of the human experience, creativity, athletic performance. What I've perceived from you is that those have blended, and I'm curious to hear what is your perspective on that overlap and intersection.
Well, everything in life is, we are creators. I think this is the idea of where we came up with, we've created deities around this. We've externalized this creativity. So we're creative beings. And if you look at the great players, I know tennis really well, so I'm going to give a tennis reference again. You look at someone like Federer, perhaps the greatest tennis player ever, and you look at the creativity and the shot making, and just look at really what's going on. There's a tremendous amount of creativity in the moment there. You look at some of the great soccer. You look at Messi, the soccer player. I mean, have you seen this guy? How creative he is. Wayne Gretzky. They're doing the unexpected. They're doing the unexpected because they are on that edge of almost making a fool of themselves, right? Because one of those things don't work out, or one of those foot movements, they could fall. The ball is going to be in a different place. They make a fool of themselves. So they're on that edge. But that's where the mastery comes in, right? So at its highest level, it's all creativity.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to share a little bit about Theta Healing and what that work entails.
So Theta Healing is another tool. It was created by Viana Steibel, probably 20 20 years ago, where she healed herself from a very bad case of cancer in the leg. It was going to be amputated, and she healed it with her mind. So again, I met someone who was a coach, and I hired them to learn Theta Healing, and I became certified in it. I went to France. He happened to be French, so I speak French. So went to France. I got certified in Theta Healing. I did an intensive course on that, and that is Theta is particularly great because it's also a meditation modality where you're able to put your brain in a theta state, which is it's a state before sleep and a very meditative state. And really, what the power of theta is unearthing and eliminating false belief systems. So that's it's really good for, these belief systems that we build up as, from a very early age, of identifying what they are and helping to relieve them of their hold on your emotional self. So that's the result. I'm talking about the result as a process. Yeah. But that's really what theta is.
What seems so aligned and powerful is, and I think it's a theme for this entire conversation, right? Is that we do end up walking around with these different belief systems that are false, that are built on old patterns of thinking, of limiting patterns of thinking. And as athletes, how much does that affect how we show up and perform? How does that affect how much of what we're able to mentally and emotionally process in the moment, to the very literal physical manifestation of that limiting belief? So I would imagine, as an athlete, this is maybe if you've taken those preliminary steps, right? If you are meditating, if you're doing some of this inner work, something like Theta Healing is a great place to lean into when you're saying, I feel myself butting up against edges that are deeper than maybe I expected or anticipated.
Yeah, absolutely. So the great thing about Theta is it's built to work with someone that can help you, a coach. So this is where someone else could come in and really have an impact on your life. Yeah. What was the rest of your question?
I think more so just, how does this kind of work affect an athlete's ability to show up? Like,
right. Absolutely.
Mental, emotional, and physical.
Yes. So everything, for me, as you see, athletes and high performance, peak performance, flow, everything that brings us to the court or the playing field affects us, right? And has an impact on our performance. I mean, this is obvious. So that can't help but be true. So I'm looking at this. For example, I look at Rafael Nadal and the community he has around him. Okay. He may not do any of these particular modalities, but he has a very healthy thing, is that he's had the same team since he was 5 years old. It's his family, and it's the people in his village. How powerful is that? So the support system are what keep us from isolation. Again, I was an isolated athlete, partly self-imposed because I was somewhat in hiding, right? Like I mentioned, or like you mentioned from the video. But we need community, and then we need the tools to deal with ourselves. So this is like this is what we call holistic, to use a key web buzzword. This is a holistic view, and the other view is show up and you're an athlete, and no matter what's in your way, you just get through it. Yes, we need that. But that's 50% of it, right? We're conscious, emotional, spiritual beings. If we don't acknowledge that, then we're not going to perform at our best, in my view.
And it trickles right down to the speed of our serve, right? As literal as a physical manifestation like that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there's the technique, and then there is just being relaxed and being present and relaxed. Well, let's not even take present. Being relaxed. The relaxed state of the whip, the rubber that's needed in the arm, kind of the feel of the rubber to get the snap, to get the serve. Everything's connected, right? So tension will not give us that result. Trying hard will not give us that result.
It's so subtle, and yet So powerful. Sasha, this has been absolutely energizing. What before I ask my final question, where can these guys go to connect with you online?
Yeah. So I think the best place is Facebook at Sasha Maxim Vishdehi, and also at Instagram, Sasha Maxim. Those are the two places.
Awesome. Awesome. So this show is called Omni Athlete because we want to understand what it takes to be the ultimate mind, body, and spirit competitor. The final question of the show is, what does it mean to you to be an Omni Athlete?
To me, what it means is bringing our full humanity to the court, the field of play, and not denying any elements of ourselves, working with who we are and what we are in that moment, because that's all we have.
Wow. Well said. Sasha, thank you for being on the show. Oh my gosh. Guys, go, if you don't know Sasha, get as familiar with his content and his world as you possibly can. One of the most energizing aspects of the content he's sharing on Instagram, on Facebook, is it's just so authentic and real. And as athletes, when we go through major transitions in life, and we go through major awakenings, shifts, just discoveries that we uncover, right? We so often are unable to bring ourselves forward and share that with our community. And Sasha has done that multiple times. And so when you dive into his content, you're going to see you can step into that world. And more often than not, when you do, your community will support you with so much more love than you could ever expect. So please connect with them, dive deep into his world. And until next time, thank you guys for watching this episode of Omni Athlete. Hey, what is up, guys? Thank you for watching another episode of Omni Athlete. Please go like and subscribe to our podcast. That is our goal right now, is just to build this community as big as we possibly can, and we need your help to do it. So like and subscribe, share our content, guys. If this content adds any value to your world, that helps you perform, connect, go deeper, go wider, whatever it is that it does for you, if it provides value, all we ask is that you share our content and help grow this community. We can't accomplish our goal of elevating global consciousness through sport without you. You are an integral part of this mission and this purpose, and we need your help. So please go like, subscribe, and share our content, and continue to help us build and grow this community that is truly motivated to not just elevate consciousness, but elevate and shift the very culture of sport, so that we can truly experience the athletic experience in a brand new and energizing way for so many people, guys. So thank you, and please like and subscribe. Until next time.